and welcome back to Sinews of War, where last time we saw Nassau finishing off the French in South America, who destroyed their auxiliary forces in battle, and they didn't have much left after that, allowing us to storm French Guijarro, meaning we've knocked them out of South America entirely by capturing their last settlement here. Back in Europe, we also were able to storm Paris, having whittled down the defenders through siege in a previously victorious battle. So now we control Paris but have the challenge of attempting to hold it. But then Savoy to our southeast declared war on us for mysterious reasons, so Paris is immediately under threat. Nassau, having finished in South America, went on to attack Trinidad and Tobago, where a large pirate force was holding the island. Then Spain declared war on us, disastrous, but luckily it didn't manage to get any of their allies into the fight, so it's not too overwhelming. Against the pirates, Nassau was easily able to win. They performed badly in battle and were wiped out, so the pirates are now gone. And to get this war started with Spain, we're going to begin with an attack on their trade node just off the coast of Brazil. But you used up the entire budget. Yes, sir. Well, it took a lot of time and effort, sir. Forgive me for my ignorance, friend, but I'm currently failing to see how it took you 2 years to shave the grip of a dagger down and shove it in the muzzle of a musket. Well, there were lots of experiments to do with it, sir. Experiments? Were you seeing what happened if you swapped the dagger for a sword, or a spear, or another musket, perhaps? Oh, wait, no. I think I know what you were doing. That pile of muskets with destroyed barrels. That pile of daggers with scorched handles. You were seeing if the dagger would fly out when you ignited the powder, weren't you? The possibility had crossed our mind at least once, sir. I thought if it worked, we'd see a revolution in warfare, sir. Then the depths of your failure run further than I had imagined. Look, I've taken a look at your design, if that word can be applied to such a thing, and I have a couple of pointers that spring to mind immediately. Firstly, the fact you can't get the dagger back out again is a little silly. Maybe a handle on the side would have been apt. Or better, consider my second pointer. Not putting the dagger in the barrel of the bloody musket! I don't know if you've considered this, but grabbing a stretch of rope and fixing the dagger to the side of the barrel is functionally identical, and in fact easier to do, and doesn't make the musket just a very expensive and unwieldy spear. I don't want to insult your intelligence by suggesting you hadn't considered that. Oh, wait, yes I do. You didn't consider that at all, did you? Right, from now on every proposal for new research goes through me. In the meantime, take your dagger, put a bloody hook or socket or something on it, and come back to me when you can still fire the musket without it falling off, okay? At your rate, it will probably be years before you can do even that. We're about to fire our first shots towards the Spanish as we engage them on this trade node just off the coast of Brazil. I've got 3 brigs and a fluid, and the problem we're going to have here immediately is that we're sailing into the wind, and the fluid's really slow at doing this. The brigs can move at a more reasonable speed. The enemy will have a bit of wind to come towards us, but they don't really have to put much effort into sailing towards us because we're attacking them. So most of the distance was closed by our ships just very slowly. So you can see the 3 brigs pull ahead and now getting close to engaging the enemy. The fluid still behind. I'm trying to get it to take a little shortcut to see if it can cut across and be sailing less into the wind and come behind the enemy's line, but you can see it's still being battered around. We are at triple speed here, so it's not really that bad, but yes, making almost no progress there. So the brigs are going to do most of the fighting as we get started. You can see we're just now sneaking in to start getting into range of the enemy's ships. The enemy has a 6th rate and a brig. The 6th rate being superior to a brig, the one at the front. That's the one to watch. Obviously the brig's going to be the same as ours, so we can overwhelm it with numbers as long as the 6th rate doesn't do too much damage. So my plan here is to try and get in front of the enemy's line and then shoot them close, but unfortunately we weren't loaded at the perfect time as I came in there to get a shot onto the front of that 6th rate, so we're just going to go around it. I'm going to try and come around the other side of their line, while the brig at the back of my little group there is going to sail through the middle of the enemy's 2 ships to see if they can get some close range shots. The fleet still floundering in the background there, not being any help whatsoever. So now the lines start twisting up as the enemy starts maneuvering as well. The enemy's upwind of me now, and I'm struggling to turn, as you can see here. I want to get a broadside into the 6th rate. It can hit me with its broadside, but because I'm turning into the wind, I can't do it fast enough, and the enemy just really has me there. They can go around behind me. So I'm going to give up on the 6th rate and instead turn back into the wind and broadside the enemy's brig. We have the enemy's brig down to low hull strength on its right side, so we might have a chance to rout that ship if we focus on it. And I'm going to try and pull the enemy's 6th rate over towards the fluid, which has a lot of guns on it, and be more able to bring it down. So now a tiny bit later, you can see I've almost done that. I've got my 2 brigs sailing towards the fleet, and the enemy are matching, sailing across from me. Of course, they'll be winning whilst we're making this little transport because they have more guns, so we want to end it as soon as possible. I have a 3rd brig which was left behind, essentially struggling to turn, and it's now going to try and catch up with the fight as the fleet comes in at the front to start this engagement proper. We want to try and get in close now and get the fleet's superior gunnery to bear on one of the enemy's ships. My plan was to use my 3 brigs to now focus down on the enemy's brig, the one that's trailing there, and the fleet's going to try and hit the enemy's 6th rate. Unfortunately, our ships are basically colliding here, some awkward manoeuvring, but I managed to get my ships in close, and I'm going to micromanage this brig here, making sure it doesn't fire at the enemy's 6th rate as it passes it there, so that it can come in and fire only at the closer brig, manually triggering the broadsides there. And you can see as the shot comes in, the enemy's brig is damaged, and it really destroys their morale to be taking that close range volley. And they actually rout at this point, so now it's everyone versus the enemy's 6th rate, which is absolutely perfect. The 6th rate is slightly upwind of us, so it could escape from this potentially if it wanted to, but they are going to continue the fight, so I'm going to micro everyone to try and get as many guns together as I can. And we're now actually skipping to about 5 minutes later. It took forever to set this up, but eventually I managed to get all my ships around the enemy's 6th rate, so we can use our superior firepower against it, hitting it from all sides with constant shots. You can see the enemy is now a little bit damaged and they're wavering, being under so much fire. The fleet in particular with 20 gun broadsides smashing the enemy's boat up, and soon enough we were able to get enough fire on them that they actually started routing. I continued the battle though because I wanted to come in close with all of my ships and hit them with more fire to make them surrender so we could capture the ship. A brig comes in, fires a couple of shots, and they surrender instantly after the enemy 6th rate did some weird jerky turns there. Anyway, the trade node and these ships are ours. Traffic's rather heavy from Brazil, don't you think? Some of these vessels in the lodger. That one isn't ours for sure. I'd wager that's a Spanish name. I suspect that some of Calumba's boys heard the news about Spain and have turned a quick profit from it. Bravo to them. Makes me feel rather at the mercy of such hunters being stuck out here on an island. Perhaps if we moved our headquarters to Paramaribo, we would be a little more safe from the fates doled out by sailors. But of course then it would be the local savages at our throats every night. Until we bring all the natives to heel, I fear it will not be safe for respected men to set foot on that dark continent. So then, Calumba will just have to keep us safe here for now. Both of the enemy's ships surrendered, so we capture both of them after the battle. I'm definitely going to take on the 6th rate because that's a decent ship. I was going to try and get the brig to just add some of its crew to my own brigs to replace losses, but after struggling with the interface I thought, well, we might as well just take the brig as well. So not only have we taken the Spanish trade node, we've actually taken both of the ships they were using to man it. And now of course it's time for us to scatter our ships once again and try and get all the trade nodes back under our control. And I thought I might as well use those Spanish ships that were on this trade node to go back and continue their work this time for us. Unfortunately, the 6th rate actually glitches out and doesn't go onto the trade node, and it actually causes my nearby ships to be unable to move for some reason. I have to move them away first, and then they can move properly over to the trade node. I don't know what's going on there, but that 6th rate is actually going to be stuck there for a couple of turns. I'm hoping eventually it will come back and start working again. Now, further north, I'm going to use a sloop from Calumba's fleet to scout out what the Spanish have around the Caribbean. We see they have a small army here at Hispaniola. It's mostly native troops there. We also saw a New Spain fleet. Luckily, we're not at war with them. They have rather cleverly occupied their own ports with more native troops, meaning I can't instantly land Hispaniola. It'll take me 2 turns at least to be able to attack that settlement, which is inconvenient. I decided with my sloop I might as well continue on and see what they have further afield. field, we discover there's not very much up here in Cuba, just a couple of troops. And I was curious to see where this trade route was going, because it was worth 4,000 a turn, so I thought something really good's happening at the end of this trade route. I think it's actually going to Veracruz. It's them trading with their little protectorate state, New Spain. So I'm going to use my sloop to raid it. That, at the very least, will bring out the Spanish fleet, if there is one in the Americas, to go and stop them. So we'll discover how many ships they have and where they are, perhaps sacrificing that sloop in the process. Now, since we know Hispaniola doesn't have much on it, I'm going to land it right away. I was going to wait for reinforcements from Curacao, but we don't really need to. We might as well just take it now and strike as quickly as we can. I can also use Calamber's fleet to raid that really valuable trade route, and it immediately loses most of its value, and we suddenly start making tons of money. Thousands that raiding is worth. So very handy. We're going to be stealing a decent amount of Spanish income off that. Now, the other problem we have with the Spanish is that they occupy Belgium. You can see they've got a small army there that could, of course, come up and attack Amsterdam if they so wished. I'm going to recruit some militia there in order to add to our defences. I would recruit something better, but I can't afford anything right now. Despite controlling so much of the world's trade, we actually don't really make much money. I can recruit two different kinds of militia, a good one and a bad one, so I decided to go with the good one. A good choice there, I think. So, of course, we do have an army in Paris which could storm Belgium right now, but Paris would almost definitely rebel. Plus, there's a Savoy stack coming from the south, which I think might just pinch it off me if I move troops out. So I'm going to stay where I am right now. All I'm going to do is move these militia, who I did have raiding the French territory, to come and occupy the Star Fort on the border between Paris and Flanders there, just in case the enemy make an attack on it. They're pretty unlikely to be able to hold it, but at least it'll not be a guaranteed loss. Next, we're going to look at the naval possibilities. The Spanish have a small fleet in the docks at Belgium there, and we can fight it if we can get them out to sea, which we can do by forcing them out of the docks using our militia from our own docks. So we push them out, they pop out strangely far away for some reason. We're going to run back to our own docks there. You can see we damaged the enemy's docks as well. They'll have to spend money if they want to get them back operational. And now we can send out our fleet to engage the enemies under our admiral here, Alamonda. He is leading a fleet which is actually kind of similar to the enemies, but a tiny bit better. The enemy has 2 5th rates and a brig. We have 2 5th rates, 2 brigs, a sloop and a fleet. But you can see, even though we have way more ships, the balance bar is still kind of even, because the 5th rates have so much of the strength in these fleets that the sort of powerful bits of our fleets are relatively evenly matched, and like having a fleet and a sloop doesn't add much to the fight. So anyway, let's see what we can do against this navy. This time we start off with the wind in our favour, so that is a good sign. I've split my fleet up into 4 groups really. One with the 2 5th rates, one with the 2 brigs, and then the sloop and the fleet on their own. Both of those ships not so useful in battle, so I'm hoping to just sneak those in somewhere to do some damage. It's going to be the brigs and the 5th rates that actually come in and be our primary warships here. So you can see the 5th rates are folding off a little after the enemy folded off actually, so they're going to engage the back of the enemy's line, while it's our brigs that are leading the attack, and they're going to get stuck fighting the enemy's 5th rate there. But not a huge problem, because we can use the winds to sail right around in front of that 5th rate. It's actually the same for both sides really. We're both using our 5th rates to fire at each other's brigs, firing at our weaker units with stronger ones. We'll need to shake things up a bit to make sure we don't lose any of our smaller ships, because we want to keep everyone firing, everyone alive. The 2 brigs are going to sail around the front of the enemy's line and go down the other side, as long as the enemy doesn't change trajectory. And I'm going to bring the fleet and the sloop into the front of the enemy as well, mainly just because that will mean they're sailing with the wind and will get there a little bit faster. I don't know if that's actually going to be a useful position for them. The 5th rates are going to fold into the enemy's line as well, but of course the enemy's line is moving, not static, and it ended up happening that we just crashed into their line. You see my 5th rate colliding with the side of theirs. The sloop, which has now arrived, comes in to fire broadside into the front of that 5th rate. I was going to try and have it then escape with the wind, but it wasn't going to happen because the 5th rate just turning would have fired into its stern. But my 5th rate exchanges close-range volleys with the enemy's 5th rate, and we come off better because the enemy catches fire by random chance, and that's going to really distract them and hammer their morale. We also now have all of our ships on the other side of the enemy's line, where the enemy's brig has broken off. So we've got basically 2 brigs, a 5th rate and a sloop, all in a good position to attack the enemy's brig. And right here, you can see I smashed that brig with a close-range broadside from the other side of my 5th rate, doing big damage to them. They're held down to below half strength after that shot. So we're going to try and chase them off, and now some good news is that the enemy's 5th rate actually routs because of that fire. It wasn't all that damage, but the fire is really going to dishearten them, so they're just going to sail away from the fight. I ordered my sloop there to chase them, because I want to fire at them a little bit more to make sure they don't come back from routing. We're also going to break off our engagement with this brig, which also appears to be trying to escape this little engagement. There's no point wasting our 5th rate firing against that brig. I can use my 2 brigs to just take down their 1. My 5th rates need to focus down on the enemy's 5th rate, and here you can see we've done just that. Totally surrounding their 5th rate here with our ships. The fleet coming in as well to use its guns on the action. The enemy's brig coming around to come back into the centre of my little death area, so that's all good for me. You can see I'm micromanaging to try and make sure all these ships still get their broadsides on the enemy's 5th rate, which is basically sailing right through with the wind. It is going to escape from my little encirclement there because we can't do enough damage to these superior ships. And the brig is now going to be there to support it. I've got a brig of my own in an awkward position there, right in range of the enemy's 5th rate and their brig at the same time. A very vulnerable point to be at, but it does mean they can turn and get a close range volley into the enemy's brig, which is of course already damaged, and most of its damage is on its right side, so this is the perfect chance to fire at them. So I'm going to micromanage that broadside to make sure we get a nice hit. We smash that brig a little bit, and now they're going to try and escape, going behind the enemy's 5th rate to avoid their fire. I've got another brig keeping pace with the 5th rate and exchanging broadsides, but of course that's not going to be too helpful. And my larger ships are kind of getting left behind here. The enemy's brig, though, is sailing towards my largest ship, so they're going to come in and be easy prey for them. And here, just a minute later, we see that brig surrendering in the background as my ships try and get around it to chase the enemy's 5th rate, which right now is basically escaping from the conflict. It has the wind, so we're going to struggle to try and keep up with it and get more chances to fire at it. My sloop coming in to cut it off.
Nunca deberíamos haber dejado el puerto. Maldita esos borrachos a dejar que los holandeses tomar las armas costeras sin luchar. Podríamos haberlos aplastado si los idiotas no habían estado durmiendo en el reloj. Y ahora nos han atrapado entre su flota detrás de nosotros y los cañones de la Gran Bretaña si intentan ejecutar. ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué el reino nos envía la flota principal de Gibraltar? Nosotros podríamos tener destruido Ámsterdam y poner fin a estos advenedicidos. Así que ahora, así nuestra mejor posibilidad es volver atrás. Trate de playa a nosotros mismos en Bélgica y derribarán a Flandes antes de que nos soplan aparte. Vamos a traer a su alrededor y mantener su dirige hacia abajo. Esto será espera en el mejor.
Eventually their 5th rate turned round and came back for some action, which of course meant it had to sail into the wind, so it was doing it particularly slowly, and I'm going to sail with the wind and just go past it with all of my ships, micromanaging their broadsides to get a nice healthy shot on each of them onto the enemy's hull, which you can see is really damaged now. We're just going to try and fold around behind them there with extra ships. I've got ships on the other side of them as well, so they're taking shots from all directions. The brig in front of them there firing, and another brig off to their other side firing at the more weakened part of their hull, although the enemy will be able to fire back. They probably don't have too many guns left though, so at this point the level of danger from being in the enemy's broadside range probably isn't too much. So we're going to fold round one last 5th rate here. It's getting a little bit stuck on another one of our ships, so it's struggling to get its broadside into range. But finally there you can see the red bar of death goes over the enemy. We hit the button and the enemy ship is torn apart by that volley. More shots come in from another 5th rate, hitting it almost from behind there. Many of the crew are killed. The hull is completely wrecked, as you can see, and finally they decide to surrender. A good decision from the enemy. So that's the end of the battle. We've managed to win a close victory over that Spanish fleet, which is especially important because that fleet could have blockaded our primary trade port or raided our trade, which would have made us be cash negative for sure. So it's important we clear up any enemy ships in this area. I decided to take on both of the enemy's 5th rates after the battle. I accidentally take on the brig there, but I'm going to put that back. I'm going to put the brig into prize money so that we can repair our ships. Now I saw the Spanish have more ships at Gibraltar, 2 more brigs and 2 more 5th rates, so another fleet a tiny bit more powerful than the one we just fought. I probably could win against it, but I want to go back to our home ports first and start repairing these ships. In particular, if I can repair up those new 5th rates, I'll then have 4 5th rates against the enemies too, and we'll definitely be able to win a naval battle, so we're going to try and do that. Now, as we move on, Spain surprised me with a raid on the East Indies. They've somehow got 2 ships here without me noticing. Perhaps they were just sitting in the corner of the map the whole time. They attack one of my fleets and I order it to run. They're going to chase it down, which at least means they're going to use up most of their movement points doing that. But it does mean that fleet is pretty much lost. The enemy has a giant advantage. I probably couldn't take it down. The galleon alone would be enough to sink a fleet, and the brig would just be adding extra support there. So we lose that ship, and then immediately popping over to Madagascar, another ship appears, this time just a 6th rate coming in to engage with one of my brigs on this trade post. Now, the balance part isn't quite so far in the enemy's favour this time, so I thought I'll try and do a one-on-one duel here. The brig is inferior, but it has a chance of winning if perhaps we can start a fire on the enemy ship or get lucky shots, manage to get behind the enemy and bombard them. We'll do okay. So I start by sailing with the wind right into the enemy as fast as I can. We take shots from the enemy as we come in, but they're targeting my sails rather than my hull or guns, so we get in without taking any substantial damage. And now I kind of mess up. You can see my ship just reefs its sails and sits still. I was trying to get it to sail past the front of the enemy's ship, but they won't do it because they want to avoid a collision, so that's why they're stuck. So I sort of came in at the wrong angle, basically. So we're going to turn off, finally getting a broadside into the side of the enemy, a nice damaging looking shot. Now I'm going to try and use my speed to get around the front of the enemy. Unfortunately, the enemy can do the classic move of just being a more maneuverable ship. They can just turn and stop me from ever turning a broadside onto them whilst they keep their broadsides on me. So we're going to struggle like this for a while. I'm going to slow my ship down to give it more turning speed, and eventually I managed to get a volley off, and here we are. A little bit later, I've come in close to get some more volleys in, and at this stage the enemy's hull is pretty damaged on one side. We're actually winning this engagement, I would say. I'm going to try and turn around here to switch onto my other broadside whilst the right broadside reloads, and of course get behind the enemy ship. They though are turning themselves, and they actually end up doing to me what I was trying to do to them at the start of the battle. They're just turning around me. I'm floundering because my guys refuse to sail while they're so close to the enemy ship to avoid collision, and yeah, they're just coming around me, hitting me out of my broadside range, but they can just keep pounding me. Not nice at all. Eventually we turn as well. We're finally going to get that left broadside off as many guns as we can, smashing the enemy's hull, the enemy's crew being thrown back by the impact of that blast. Their hull now down to half strength. Our hull's still pretty good right now, actually, but unfortunately we're apparently on fire. I don't see the fire, but our crew claim that the ship's on fire, perhaps below decks, and that destroys our morale. So although we've done loads of damage to the enemy's ship and our ship's okay, we take one more volley and that routs us because we were already wavering. So that was unfortunate. I think if we hadn't had the bad luck of taking that fire, we might have been able to get somewhere with that. So I was hoping for good luck, but unfortunately it favoured the enemy. This brig and that trade node are going to be lost. I knew this would happen. Director General Grotius kept promising I would have more ships to protect our ports, but nothing ever came. And this is the direct result. I sincerely hope the only reason he sent nothing here is that all our ships were sent to the East Indies. Last I heard, there was not a single warship larger than a brig for 10,000 square miles out there. The Spanish raiders must now be to the northeast. They will move south for certain and try to push us out of Madagascar. We shall have to chance sailing to intercept. I want all captains ready at once, and throw out as many schooners as you can to head north to look for more company ships to join us. Use the trade vessels if you must. Lives are not worth poxy ivory. So unfortunately we're going to have to say goodbye to that brig. Curiously, lets me click this add crew button. Not 100% sure what that does, but anyway, the brig survives that fight and runs away, but as usual the Spanish are going to hunt them down and just destroy them. Handily using their movement points up, of course, making them run all the way across the Madagascar map there. Now I could have fought this one again. I thought there's probably still a chance of winning, but at this point I was actually sick of fighting naval battles. I decided to roll the dice on an auto-resolve. Unfortunately, we lost. So that brig is gone, and the trade node, of course, is gone as well. And I think 13 colonies are actually going to swoop in and steal it from me, so we're not going to be able to get it back. Now the Spanish fleet in the Americas also appears to attack my sloop, kind of as expected. The sloop runs away. Unfortunately, they're able to pursue. We do discover the location of the trade port in Veracruz, but otherwise that is just a lost sloop. It does though mean that the Spanish fleet has moved so far it's not going to be able to do anything else against us in the Americas. But that ship back over in Madagascar apparently still had points. It goes in to attack one of my really weak brigs. I roll the dice again and fail, so we've just lost a second brig and a second trade node over there in Madagascar. And they're also going to start moving to attack us even more in the East Indies. Not good so far, the Spanish making a comeback in the trade wars. Now we see Savoy's main force come up and besiege Paris. They don't make an attack right away, so we're going to have the sally to get rid of them. Some good news is that we get a new gentleman over in Amsterdam, so 2 universities there, both with gentlemen. Now only 1 turn away from unlocking the ring bayonet, the superior version of the plug bayonet that allows us to still fire, so that will be important. Now back over in Madagascar, we've got a new brig just arrived from India, and he is going to link up with good old Admiral Doven, who can now bring his fleet, which was just waiting around in the area, to bear against that Spanish ship. They're going to go right down. We just quickly auto-resolve that and get rid of them. They were already damaged, so it was extra easy. The new brig is going to occupy that trade node, and Doven is going to go back to his trade node. Unfortunately now 2 of the nodes in Madagascar occupied by other powers, 13 colonies and Sweden, still making a decent amount of money right now though. So for Admiral Callenber, we now know the location of the Spanish fleet, or at least we know the location of 2 ships, which are, as far as we know, all the Spanish fleet in the area is, so we have a chance to take it down. I also noticed the trade node nearby, the trade route, sorry, is only worth 0 per turn, so it seems the Spanish trade has been blockaded at home, so there's no point in raiding anymore. I'm going to leave a brig behind to act as a transport, which we'll need in a moment, as we'll see, and then the rest of the fleet is going to go over. We can just totally crush this little Spanish fleet with an auto-resolve. No ships lost, damage among our ships, but we'll repair them eventually, and there may not be any other naval threats anyway. Callenber getting more experience, getting +2 morale when attacking, very useful there. And I'm going to use the rest of his movement points to start bringing him back over towards where the action is. Not sure what he'll do from now on, especially if the Spanish trade doesn't come back, but we'll see. So for Van Nassau, it's now time to begin the siege of Hispaniola. The army inside gets garrison line infantry, but it's mostly auxiliaries with strong melee troops there. Now I could attack right now, of course, or even have a small advantage on the balance bar, but I was thinking, now that I know I'm only 1 turn away from getting that ring bayonet, I could attack next turn to minimize the damage we're going to take in any melees that might occur. We've got a new unit of line infantry and some 12-pounder guns coming onto the field down there at Curacao, so that brig I left behind is now going to be super useful. We can bring them over to Hispaniola, and because the enemy abandoned their ports to reinforce their city, we can actually move them in right now. We can land at the ports and then walk across the island to get involved in the siege, so further enhancing our strength. Again, probably could have attacked now, but I decided to just wait and do it next turn, especially because we know the Spanish are so weak in the area that 1 turn's difference probably won't matter. It's going to be worth having the extra survivors in our army. So now jumping back over to Europe, I can recruit a new general into Paris in order to bolster this army. The army is really damaged from its attack on Paris, still haven't had the money to actually retrain any of it. The General Voss, is nothing remarkable whatsoever. We'll see if he gains any experience in battle perhaps, and it's time for that battle. We need to sally out against Savoy. The balance bar roughly equal. We have many more regiments, but all of ours are damaged. We do probably have a morale advantage because the enemy has a few units of militia among its lines, which are going to be easier to rout, and a couple of their cavalry units are provincial cavalry rather than a regiment of horse, which is what we have, which means we'll have a tiny advantage over them. Overall though, we're going to have to work hard to win this and make sure we keep all of our regiments alive, because if too many troops die then Paris will just rebel anyway. We'll see that battle next time. The United Provinces were learning the downside of a budget based heavily on distant trade deals. Just as they had once destroyed Spain's global trade networks in their war for independence, the Spanish were now hitting hard and fast with small attacks across the world, sinking trade vessels and ending Dutch control of key ports. Without the flow of goods that they'd grown used to, the Dutch military could not afford vital supplies and recruits for their war in Europe. Spain showed little to gain from the chaos without a land army of her own, and instead it was the minor powers who capitalized on the new trade opportunities. One of those powers was Savoy, who marched on the undersupplied Dutch army at Paris. Thanks for watching. We'll have fights for Paris and for Hispaniola in the next episode of Sinews of War.